Hey everyone, this is Yuri Rashkin, and this video is going to center on a topic near and dear to my heart, and a topic that I believe we have not discussed enough in public speaking, and that is the concept of silence and pauses. And that is why today's lecture is called Sounds of Silence: Why Silence in Public Speaking is More Than Lack of Sound. Here we go. Before we get to our topic at hand, let's take a look at the bigger historical perspective on this weird concept of pauses, the bigger brother of pause, silence. Throughout history, people have taken vows of silence as a special occasion, or sometimes perhaps we would honor someone with a moment of silence. Silence has a very special meaning to us. In monastic tradition, sometimes people would take vow of silence that would be during certain times of day, like during evening time, people would not speak. Or they would take a vow of silence for several days at a time, or longer. Why would people want to do that, and what significance does it carry? Well, that is considered to be time that we are alone, and of course in monastic traditions, this would be religious underpinning. Therefore, this is opportunity for us to be closer to higher power. A church is another place where we might find ourselves in silence because of a special moment that silence brings. But can you imagine yourself going on a vow of silence lasting a week or 10 days or 2 weeks when you would not speak to anyone? That sounds crazy. From silence to pause. Well, I wanted to find a quote for this presentation. You know how much I appreciate a good quote. And here I found one, and it says, "The most precious things in speech are the pauses." Sir Ralph Richardson. And I thought that's really wonderful because it's a great quote. It really expresses what I'm going for. But who was Sir Ralph Richardson? Because, context really matters. So I looked him up. Turns out Sir Ralph Richardson was not only an actor, was not only a British actor, but he was a British Shakespearean actor, which means that he acted in Shakespeare's plays. That was his specialty. He was famous for his Shakespeare. So here we have someone who is an actor famous for saying lines of the most famous playwright in the English language, and this person says that the most precious things in speech are the pauses. I thought, wow, that is really interesting. All right, so in this video, we're going to cover 3 things. First, why good speakers love pauses. 2, why audiences need pauses. And 3, pause techniques. First of all, why good speakers love pauses. Pausing at the beginning gives us the freedom to start when we are ready, rather than plunging in and getting it wrong. There is no law that says that we must there's no law that says that we must begin our speech the second we are done with the second our presentation is up and running. The second we made it on the stage, the second anything happens, we actually have freedom to begin when we want to. And time, in situations when people are speaking within a certain amount of time, usually doesn't begin until we begin speaking. So the clock is not running. You're just standing there. You can catch your breath and you can begin because you're ready, because this is the time that you chose to begin your presentation. Pausing makes it easier for us to stay in the moment. If we run out of words or have none to say, the pause gives audience time to fill in the blank. I can tell you about my trip to Summerfest, except that I don't really like using all these emotional words, and I don't really like to talk about details, but I really want to tell you, I want you to feel what I experienced at Summerfest. One way I can do that is by giving you time and pauses, so I would be in the moment, and instead of having words that I don't have, I would pause. Check this out. I had an awesome time last time I went to Summerfest. We went and had great food. The music, oh my goodness. I can tell you music was great. Sounds were coming from everywhere. Stages here, stages there, except now with COVID, I don't know when we can go there again next. Hopefully this next summer could be good. In any way, what I'm doing here is I'm cutting any descriptions out of my presentation, but instead filling those descriptive words with pauses, allowing you, the audience, to fill in the blanks for me. You can do it for a while. After a while, people kind of go, so really, what happened? But it does help to bridge a gap if we're out of words or have none to say. Pauses help convey emotion by making the speech more authentic and real. If you're going to come out and read us a speech, chances are one of the problems that you're going to have, why we're going to lose interest, is because we read without pauses. Therefore, one simple way to inject some emotion is just to insert some pause, because emotion is feeling. And we want people to think and we want people to feel. And if we want them to feel, we want to make it more authentic and conversational, we want to give them that pause. A pause, believe it or not, can actually do what it is intended on doing, which is to help us collect our thoughts. And if we pause, it will allow us the time to focus. And when we are focused and we know what is the next thing that we want to talk about, it allows us to feel more calm. Pauses give us time to get back on track if we've lost our way. As the meme says, the best thing about getting old is... Where was I going with this? It's not just for old people. We all forget things. And in order to remember things, sometimes we need a pause. Because pause lets us collect our thoughts, and as the audience is feeling emotions, we can remember what it is that we were speaking about. Because you know what? Anxiety happens to everyone. Stage fright, the fact that even if there were no audience there and you just had to speak on this topic, what are the chances that we might forget a word, we might forget where we were going, regardless if there are people there or not? Guess what? We take a pause. And if we're prepared and we have practiced, it's going to come back to us. And that's when we get back on track, because taking a pause during a presentation that we have rehearsed and we know well is not going to throw us off. It's going to help us. Pauses give us time to get back on track if we're lost our way. Pauses let our mind catch up to our mouth, because as speakers, we're performing two tasks simultaneously. An internal task, which is thinking of everything that needs to happen and what we're presenting and what we're speaking about, and slides and and time. All of those things are internal tasks. But then there's also external task, which is speaking. We're not just standing around going... No, we're also speaking. And check this out. When we are reading without pauses, it tires the audience and it sounds inauthentic. We can read faster than we can think. And we can even talk faster than we ourselves can think. So sometimes when our mouth gets ahead of itself, we need to stop so our brain could catch up. Pausing gives the advantage to the internal task and helps mind catch up to mouth. It is so important when we present an idea to people that we really want them to think about, that we give them time and space to think about it. Sometimes in a speech, just a momentary pause is enough. Sometimes in life, a much longer period of time may be needed. But since we're speaking here about public speaking, let's remember that if we tell our audience something we want them to think about, we need to stop. We need to take a pause, and we need to give our audience time to think about it. Once we said something that we need people to think about, give them time. time. And that means close your mouth and let that space, pause, do its magic. Pauses replace filler words. This is something that I think is relevant to a lot of people because we have this way of thinking about speaking that we are saying words. We don't want to stop. We don't always know what the next word is going to be, but if we stop, that is scary and that is wrong, and we should not stop. We should keep speaking as long as we possibly can. But guess what? We end up making a lot of filler sounds. As I was I? Rather than experiment with all the different sounds you can make when you are surprised, but you have to go on, experiment with the idea of speaking from silence to silence. So you know that there is nothing, there's silence. Then you're going to say whatever it is that you're going to say, and then there will be pause and silence again. And this way, the pause at the end and pause at the beginning feels more natural because we are expecting for the pause to be there when we're done. On the downside, filler words undermine our credibility. They signal lack of knowledge, lack of preparation, or lack of authenticity. Frequently, you can tell that the speeches that have the most vocal fillers are the ones where if person practiced more, they would do much better with their vocal fillers as well as with other parts of their presentation. This is really neat. Check this out. Pauses are healthy because I know you thought about this was like a speech class, not a health class, but I'm here to help you. Pauses are healthy. Has anyone ever attempted to deliver a speech without breathing? It's impossible unless the speech is like very, very, very short. But chances are you'll need to breathe even for that short speech. So don't worry about it. There is nowhere on the grading rubric that it says deduct points for excessive breathing. You can breathe. I can breathe. It's a wonderful thing. In some ways, it's my favorite exercise. But a pause allows us to breathe. It also allows us to swallow, which is another thing that we sometimes forget to do, but we need to swallow, we need to breathe, and we need to drink water because all this is a machine. It is a unique machine to us in the sense that every one of us has a unique voice with a unique quality, but we all need to breathe, we all need to swallow, and we all benefit from drinking water to keep throat lubricated. So here's your opportunity, here's pitch for healthy living and public speaking effectiveness. Just take a pause to have a drink of water. Pausing before you start speaking makes you feel taller, smarter, in control, and able to think more clearly. I think those are fantastic set of benefits, not just for a short person, but really for anybody who wants to feel any of those things. For some reason, the list is omitting having more hair because no amount of pausing is going to make me feel like I have hair on top of my head. So I will just take a pause to feel taller, smarter, in control, and able to think more clearly. Pauses allow speaker to gather feedback from audience because sometimes we just don't look very much at our audience, even though we should. But what can we look at our audience? Well, during a pause, because during a pause, we're not speaking. Therefore, we can just concentrate on looking up and gathering some feedback. It's important to gather feedback, just a quick side note, because we want to know if people are paying attention, if they have fallen asleep, if they left, if they're on their cell phones. Those kinds of things matter because as a presenter, you don't want to present to an audience that is not paying attention. So if you see that they're all paying attention, you're doing great. If you look up and you see that they're not paying attention, then you think that you may want to adjust perhaps in your presentation, maybe not even this time, maybe next time. But getting that feedback and using a pause to get that feedback is a really handy way to use a pause. Pausing allows the speaker to look at the audience and gather some feedback. Who's paying attention? Who's agreeing? Who's disagreeing with the speaker? Are the people interested, excited? Perhaps they are lighting torches and you may want to be on your way. Now, why do audiences need pauses? First of all, it gives them time to absorb our points because as a seed that's been planted into their mind and watered with our words, now it needs time to grow. And those pauses give the audience time to absorb our points. It gives them confidence, surprisingly enough, that we know what we're doing. It's almost counterintuitive because it feels like if I'm stopping, then I'm instantly giving away the fact that I just don't know what to say next. But from the audience's point of view, it actually gives them confidence that we know what we're doing. And of course, it helps them stay focused on the points that matter. Because as speakers, what we want to do is we want to take our audience in the beginning of the speech with the first attention getter, and we want to carefully carry them through us, lead them by the hand to the end of the presentation so they go on this whole journey that we have carefully laid out for them, and they don't get distracted or they don't lose focus and they keep paying attention. You know how hard it is for you to pay attention to somebody else's speech, and we sometimes really need people to pay attention to our speeches. Sometimes we have money at stake. Sometimes we have careers, reputations, all sorts of projects that we really need people to pay attention. If we speak without stopping, they will lose focus. See? So we stop. Perhaps we utilize one of the techniques we already have discussed, such as breathing or having a drink of water. And continue with your presentation. This time is not wasted because the audience really just appreciates the opportunity to have observed the difference. We had noise, we had words, and now we have silence. Ooh, something happened. We can think about this, we can think through this, we can think about what the speaker said, we can gather our thoughts, we can refocus, and we can stay laser-like focused. As audiences, the first thing we want to be is we want to be made comfortable, like with a friend. Whatever presentation we're listening to, we want it to sound more like a conversation than a traditional speech. Conversation is easier to listen to. Conversations have pauses. Pauses help your audience understand you. This is a really interesting concept because if you think about it, we have hundreds of years now of text. Books in wide circulation, and we know that you can't just have words running non-stop. It's really kind of hard to read. We lose the point of the text. Just a run-on sentence. We want things that are visually clear when we look at a book. We want to see clear paragraphs. We want to be able to see letters clearly. All of that presentation stuff, that little things, they really mean a lot. And you can ask any book editor, they'll tell you that the way the book is presented is very, very important. Well, guess what? When we are speaking, we have to represent all of those things with just the way we present. And we don't have bold and italics and underlining in different fonts and colors and all of those things that visual medium might have. We have to get that effect out through our words and the space between the words. Because since our audience does not see the text, pauses become punctuation. They become these little structural beacons that indicate to audience when there's something important or when there's a new idea or anything like that. And what it creates is improved speech comprehension, which means that at the end, people are more likely to be able to recall what you were speaking about if they have improved speech comprehension. And we get there by having pauses in our presentations. Pauses help engage our audience, and lack of pauses tires audience to the point they might not even realize that I wrote audience and it put it there as two separate words, audience. But if the audience is tired, they might miss this. That would be terrible unless we want them not to pay attention. But no, we do want them to pay attention, and so we need to have pauses.
Hi, I'm Sean Shannon, and I have the record for doing the famous to be or not to be speech, but a little quicker than that. Too meant to be, that's a question whether to know with the mind itself. Listening is an hours of outrageous fortune, no take alms against to see if troubles my posing in them, to die, to sleep no more, by sleep to say, we am the heartache and 1,000 natural shocks of flesh, to dread, to constipation, doubly to wish, to die, to sleep a chance dream out, there's a referee in that sleep, death, which in the coming of shift off this mortal comas gives pause. There's the spectrum, calamity in life, for this and Constantine, the press around the paramount, consume me the pangs, the slides, love, the lost, the insults, and the spurns of patient merit, the days, we some was quest mate with a broad con, who would fires better, and surrey left, that are just signed death, the end is covered country for no returns, puzzles the will, makes their brothers as we haven't found doing of. This conscious domain covers it on this native use, evolutionary sequel, Becca's thought, enterprise, a great pith moment, disregard, the currents turn around, losing of action. Now, that was not my perfect one. To get the record, I had to make no mistakes. I know I made three mistakes I can recall I made, but it gives you an idea of how fast it sounds. Sometimes I get asked if there's any repercussions, any downsides to being able to talk really quickly. And I would say that if you talk so quickly that people understand what you're saying, if you lose them in the conversation because they can't understand the words you're saying, then you have to repeat everything. And that actually doesn't save a lot of time at all. Better just to go a little bit slower and get the job done.
Pauses control the overall pace of our delivery. And this is important to understand. Our audience has cognitive limitations. There's only so much information they can take in. There's only so much information they can absorb. And that means that we need to give them time, which is pauses. And a pause is a bit of time to catch up and to think through the things we have to say. So many of you received feedback that said, you should speak slower, speak slower, You don't need to speak slower. First of all, we need to think faster, but sometimes we just can't. So what can you do? You shouldn't speak slower. You should just have pauses at the end of your thoughts. And when we're reading, it's important to remember that we forget and we become not aware of how fast we are actually speaking, because we can read faster than we can speak. We don't have to think about the words that are going to be coming up next because they're written right there. So we can speed up and we can get through this. It doesn't help our audience because they already are saying that we're speaking too fast. And now we're going to start reading and take it to the next level. So that means that when we're reading, we need to have even longer pauses to slow ourselves down, to give ourselves better pace, and to help our audience understand us. And now, 10 pause techniques. First of all, power pause. It earns the attention of the audience. Allows speaker a few seconds to center themselves. Take a deep breath. And confidently launch into opening words. This is also our opportunity to practice power pause. Remember that video and discussion we've had about the importance of power pause and occupying more space because we feel stronger and better and more confident in a power pose after we hold that for a couple of minutes? Well, we're not going to have that opportunity to hold it for a couple of minutes before we begin speaking. That's 120 seconds. That's a lot of seconds. But we can actually stand in a power pause in a power position before power pose, before we begin speaking, as perhaps another speaker is presenting. If we know that our turn is coming up, rather than sit there like this, we can sit in a power pose. But a power pause at the beginning earns the attention of the audience. It allows the speaker a few seconds to center themselves, take a deep breath, and confidently launch into opening words. Here's a practical suggestion. Before you speak, try to 1. Lock your eyes on each of your soon-to-be listeners. Remember the sprinkler method? We'll look around. 2. Force yourself before you begin your presentation to say in your own mind each word of your opening sentence. Here's what I mean. You don't need to, and I don't recommend memorizing your entire speech, but it is a good idea to memorize your attention getter. And here's what you can say it in your own mind, your attention getter, before you speak in your speech. And every second that you will wait will strengthen the impact of your opening words. So you look at the people, you say in your mind your first sentence, and then you wait, and you begin when you're ready. The emphasis or the punchline pause. This is a tandem technique, and pause before says listen up. Hey, check this out. Pause after says put that in your memory. So you can have a pause before something important and after it. So before we pay attention, after it we put it in our memory. Examples. Before or after a transition or contrast word. Folk wisdom suggests picturing your audience naked. However, I think that's a terrible idea. Or before or after a key word. Olivia Mitchell offers a cure. We just said a cure, that's an important word, so we should give it a pause. Called chunking. Again, we give it a pause because that was really important. To eliminate ahs and ums. Okay, so you can use pause even more than once in a sentence to attract attention to different parts of the sentence and to get our brain to do different things with that information. How cool is that? I'm in thought pause. Well, you forgot something? Take a pause. Making a big point? Then perhaps it's a dramatic pause. Part rhetorical, part theatrical, not for the faint-hearted. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that holding a long pause is very stressful for somebody who doesn't do public speaking very often. And so if you don't do public speaking very often, it's going to be very stressful for you to hold a long dramatic pause. However, if you're making a big point, you should give it an appropriate amount of silence. Here is an important suggestion that I violate myself all too often, and that is whenever we present a new visual, we should pause. In a rule of thumb is if we have a complicated visual, we need to give people several seconds to look it over, and if it's a simple visual, we should give them just a second or two to look it over, but the fact is until they check it out and they feel comfortable with this information, they're not going to begin listening to us. This is where if you have a lot of information on the slide, you might as well just stand there for a couple of minutes while people take all of this information in, and then you begin speaking. So simple image, short break, complicated image, longer break, but new visual always calls for a nice, good pause. Get a drink pause. Don't hesitate. Lubricate the machine, calm down nerves. Show control. This has been really incredible to me to observe how confident people come across, not when they're playing with their water bottle like I'm doing right now, but when they pick up their water bottle, take a short pause. Maybe if they were doing it with a martini, all the comedians making fun of little straws, like, that wouldn't be good. This is why having a glass of water or water bottle is nice, looks professional, and it actually shows a lot of control that you are able to stop, think to yourself, I'm thirsty, I should have a drink. And then you stop and you interrupt this presentation and you have a drink. That is such a demonstration of control. I highly recommend you do it sometimes just for fun and time it. It is, if you have a visual change, if you have a complicated visual change, and you have a big chart that you have in your presentation, you are really excited because this chart's going to explain everything. Well, when you show that chart, maybe that's the opportunity and the time to have that drink of water while your audience is still looking at the PowerPoint and is digesting the information. Again, combine things, gain from this, and have a more effective presentation. Do not drink water like this.
In the short time that I've been here in Washington, nothing has frustrated me more than false choices like the one the president laid out tonight. The choice isn't just between big government or big business.
Or like this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Question pause. Consider for a moment. If you're going to ask your audience a question, it is required to give them a pause to either answer it or at least think about it. Because if you're going to ask your audience a question and say, hey, raise your hand if you ever left the United States, anyways, I was going to say, and just continue with your presentation without giving people a chance to answer your question, do you think the audience is going to be happy? Do you think this is going to be a positive experience for them? It's going to feel like they are just part of the experience being steamrolled over by the speaker. In fact, this is so important that even a rhetorical question, such as, is the Pope Catholic? Also requires a pause, because people need to think through anything with a question mark, even if it's a rhetorical question, and the answer therefore lies in the question. But pause is still required after any question. Warning: failure to pause following a question frustrates the audience. The clause pause or the comma pause. You can use a brief pause to separate two clauses or to separate items of a list clearly. For example, wanting to impress my wife on our anniversary, I prepared eggs, bacon, and pancakes for breakfast. Versus, wanting to impress my wife for our anniversary, I prepared eggs, bacon, and pancakes for breakfast. See? Just a little bit of pause creates a lot of feeling and a lot of color in a very simple sentence. The sentence pause. Use a medium length pause for periods, exclamations, or question marks. So for example, we were married 10 years ago. I still remember my first look at her coming up the aisle. Now, beware of the infinite and. This is something that some people have a tendency to use in their speeches, especially if the speeches are impromptu and not particularly planned out, because as the speaker delivers their thought, they go, wait a minute, and one more thing. And then they mention another thought, and then it really stops being a speech, becomes more of a rant. And then even good pauses are not going to save you. The paragraph or idea pause, frequently used when separating 2 points from one another. For example, the third benefit of this approach is, if we're mentioning a number, this is the first solution, this is the second solution, this is the third problem. What a great opportunity for a pause. Or we can use a pause to separate a story or anecdote diversion from the main normal speech, with a longer pause before and after the story, like on a page where we would have separation between different ideas, different stories. In a speech, we can create that separation with a pause. Just checking. A sentence pause should generally be what than a clause pause? A sentence pause should generally be longer than a clause pause, and that was an example of a question pause, which are really hard to hold. To ask your audience a question, even a group of students or people watching a video, and then hold a pause waiting for the answer to come, is not as easy as it may appear. Practice before you do this for real with real audiences. In the end, until you become comfortable with silence, use pauses that are longer than you think is necessary, perhaps longer than is comfortable for you. Time for us as speakers flows much faster than it does for the audience. And so you as a speaker may feel that you are now using these really long pauses, but your audience may not even notice. So practice and have pauses that are maybe longer than what you're comfortable with. You may ask, how many seconds should a short, medium, or long pause be? Well, guess what? There's no strict rule, because as it varies widely. As I mentioned, each one of us has a unique voice, and each one of us has a unique pace, unique features to our voice. And what we need to remember is this: be consistent. Whatever your pause for the period is, make it a little bit longer than you pause for a comma would be if you're reading. And if you're reading and you have a paragraph, you want to have a little bit longer pause there. But every one of us has our own unique rhythm and pace, and to say that this pause should be this long and this pause should be that long may not fit your set of circumstances, may not fit your own pattern of speaking. So just be consistent. Now, a few words about this vow of silence business. Why do people do that? Well, here are some reasons why people have taken vow of silence. 1, to feel amazing calm. 2, to listen more. 3, to learn about yourself. 4, to appear smarter. And 5, as a social or political statement. Here is a very well-known presenter and public speaking expert, Vanessa Von Edwards, who decided to undertake as an experiment a vow of silence. And she made a card where she's letting people know that she cannot speak because she's taken a vow of silence. That is an interesting way, I think, of trying something that perhaps you haven't tried before, and yet you don't need to go through a class. You don't need to learn a new yoga technique. All you have to do is just take a vow of silence and see if you can discover all of these amazing benefits. How long to practice silence, to take this vow? Well, there's 3 ways that I can think of. 1 is few hours every day, like fasting. Intermittent fasting, you can say 16-8. We eat during 8 hours, we don't eat during 16 hours. So maybe therefore practice speaking for 8 hours and being silent for 16 hours, or vice versa. Next, try being silent few days at a time as an amazing exercise to learn more about yourself and others. Can you be silent for a few days? Granted, you have to speak at work. Perhaps you can only speak at work and then take a vow of silence for the rest of the time. And finally, digital silence. Simply taking a vow of silence these days, simply getting off of social media network that we may be using on a regular basis, can seem as a vow of silence of sorts, and can be just as cleansing and useful to us as a real vow of silence. Here are your 5 questions for the final. Number 1, drink blank to keep throat lubricated. The answer is water. Question 2, using WD-40 helps lubricate your throat. False. Question 3, speak from silence to silence. Question 4, your audience has cognitive limitations. And finally, question 5, name 1 feeling speakers feel when pausing before speaking. Your choices are taller, smarter, in control, and ability to think more clearly. That is the lecture on uses of pauses in a speech. Good luck on the test, and good luck in your public speaking career.